Thanksgiving, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Are you
such
gonna,
a show?
It's only on this planet.
Oh, are you gonna say it? The oath? Is that like? Do we have to pay you more money?
or any money?
Right, exactly.
Should we pay you in coffee?
I'm like Michael Buffer. That's actually a thing. I was on a sitcom, and they had Evander Holyfield, and Michael Buffer is the boxing announcer.
Yeah.
Let's get ready to rumble. And they hired him to be the boxing announcer in the thing that they were doing. And he said, well, for me to say the phrase, that's an extra $3,000. And they're like, yeah, it's all right. Just say, let's start the fight. But then, of course, when they were taping and there was an audience there, ladies and gentlemen, and he's like, I can't not say it.
Yeah.
And so then he said, like, let's get ready to rumble. It's like, I just threw that one in there. So, yeah, I guess I have.
No, Phil and Susan are here of their own precious volition. They're not being paid to appear. I thank you so much for being here. Because it's Thanksgiving week. I'm very grateful. But thank you so much. Susan brought, to help me wrangle Phil in here. And I appreciate it very much. Because we're just a tiny little baby shop.
Yeah, with a lot of people in it.
Yeah. Yes, thank you everyone for coming.
Do you always have chairs set up like that? They're really weird. I feel like I'm facing the wrong way.
Right? Yes. I actually was telling someone that. I was like, oh my God, the Justice League is coming. I have to make everything nice. I feel like I'm getting ready for like family to come. And I was like, but then they're going to see it like this, and this isn't how it usually looks. So I think it's hilarious that you pointed that out.
No, but you always clean up when coming. You don't leave your shoes in the hallway.
Right.
So this is how I always am.
Yes. Yeah. a pig.
But you know what? Andrea Romano and I just did a radio show last week, and Phil's name came up, as it always does. And she was telling the story
about the audition.
Oh,
that's right. Yeah.
With Dennis.
Yeah, she never knew that.
Right. So could you share the story? Because when people meet Phil, they're always surprised that he's not 6'4" and 300 pounds, because that booming, wonderful Green Lantern voice. And so I never knew the story. And Andrea was telling the story on the radio, and I thought that's a great story to share with the audience.
No, it's funny. When we were auditioning for Justice League, there were a bunch of people there auditioning for Green Lantern. I don't know if they were just doing Green Lantern that day or what, but I was waiting with a bunch of actors outside, and the actor who came out before I went in was Dennis Haysbert. Like Dennis played the president on 24. He does the Allstate commercials, and he basically is Jon Stewart. He's like 6'3", 250, and he's got that voice. You're in good hands with Allstate. And I saw him come out and just like, there's nothing else to do but that. Because you look at those Bruce Timm character designs, and all the men have these gigantic chests. So you're thinking, well, you've got to have a big voice to go with that. So I'm like, well, they got to hire him, so I'm just going to do him. And I went in and did my, best Dennis Haysbert. Well, I added a little bit of my dad. My dad's got a real sort of smoky kind of voice. So I added a little, you've got, Dennis was like, you're in good hands with Allstate. Which is very sort of clean, and, he's got that, but I added a little bit more, gravel, little texture under it, so that, when you say, I'm Green Lantern of Sector 2814,
yeah.
It rings.
As you do, yeah.
Like you do. And I still don't know. I mean, I'm going to assume that they liked mine better, but it's entirely possible that Dennis was already like, well, I'm going to be out of the country on this movie or this show for 2 years. Like, all right, let's go with number 2.
But you don't know? You never asked?
No.
No?
I don't want to see that gift horse's tonsils.
There's Rich. He could speak to it.
There.
Rich was there. Rich Fogel was one of our producers on the show.
It was like no question. And
basically going into it, Bruce was like, oh no, his voice isn't right for it. He's not going to do it. You know, forget it. You know, we'll audition and stuff like that. And you came in and you did the audition, and it was by far the best that anybody did. And Bruce just looked at me and went. So yeah, that's killed it.
Well, because I'm sure, up to that point, you guys had probably only heard me do static, right?
Exactly. Well, that's what he was locking in on.
And what does static sound like compared to Green Lantern?
My name is Static.
Right.
Pretty much the same thing.
So you out Dennis, which is great. I love it.
I love that you told that story because I'm sure there's actors in the audience or voiceover people that when you do go on all these auditions and they always say, well, you have to go in and do like 100 to get one. So it's amazing to think that you went in and were like the typical thing. Like if I went to an audition, I'm like, oh, look at all these people. Oh, well, she's known. She's getting it. We all know who's getting it.
Right.
So I love that you also were like, well, shit, what am I going to do?
No, but that's the thing. I mean,
But then he says you blew them away. So it's like you never know.
you
So
always have to do your best because, Susan, our job is the auditioning. The actual work is the reward. It's like, hey, I get to work today!
And what was so great about hearing that story from Andrea on the radio was it brought me back to the time before we were those characters. And so it was just Maria driving to Warner Brothers to audition for Hawk Girl. And, Carl, I can't imagine anyone but Carl Lumley being Martian Manhunter. He's so divine in the role. But it was just, it brought me back to 2000, even I think 1999, when we were auditioning. And then come to 17 years later, here we are doing interviews and things like that. And, and so it's, good run.
And it's it's funny because right now it seems sort of, it's like, it's inevitable. It couldn't have been any other way. But you forget that there's so many elements that went into making it and making something that lasts. I mean, first and foremost, the writing. The fact that, these characters had existed before, and even in animation, most of them had existed before. But just, they didn't nail it. I mean, Super Friends was fine.
It was more than fine, it was super. Right? Are you with me?
And of its time, but this, I think, transcends its time.
yeah. So did you, you guys ran into each other at auditions all the time, right? No. You were never
Well, because we're auditioning for the same stuff.
Right, exactly.
So he's my competition.
Yeah.
No, but of course I, knew him, of him.
So when you guys were cast, or before you were cast, did they bring in certain people together to see how you could work together, or you just all got individually cast and then you all met each other?
Yeah, that was just individual.
But we did a lot of, I was thinking back, we did a lot of publicity. There were photo ops, and I don't know if you remember, it was like a really long time. Right, it was so long ago, and then we did San Diego Comic-Con when the show was first airing. Kevin and I have pictures of me and Kevin with this gigantic Wonder Woman cosplayer. She's just gigantic, and we're both looking up at her. So yeah, there was quite a bit, but no, we didn't know. I went out to dinner with Kevin Conroy when we first got the jobs. He took me to dinner.
Oh.
And it all started from there. And he, and so that's where, we all just were together.
Yeah. And did you, because it's an ensemble, when you were recording, was it the ensemble record or was it individual? Yeah, ensemble record? I know Andrea, she was like a ghost over there, talked about how she preferred to do ensemble recordings because you can work off of each other. And I remember at Wonder Woman Day you said improv was one of the #1 things that you recommend for people who want to get into voiceover because you do so much improvising off of each other. I mean, you come from a comedy world, obviously, so...
Although we weren't allowed to improv in the sessions. It was very strict to the script. But but to be able to do it like Phil does it, to have those skills,
Yeah.
I think it just benefits anybody going into a room like that, to be able to think on their feet and come up with something, and just even the auditioning, to be able to have all those ideas, not to mention like if you do loop group kind of work, ADR, all of that, there's just nothing better.
Now that you brought that up,
Yeah.
do either of you do loop grouping, or prior, did you do any loop grouping to try
I've
and
done it
get
in the
into
past.
the
Yeah.
into
I've
the
done
business?
some, but I've never been in one regularly.
Oh, okay.
But I've done various guests.
Those things are harder to get into than animation.
It is?
Yeah, they're incredibly
loop
hard.
groups?
Yes, very.
They're real tight, huh?
Very
It's
tight.
like lucrative, right?
Very lucrative, but very stressful, very
Uh-huh.
high stress. You know, it's a competitive world, and you have to know your stuff
Uh-huh.
on any given day. So if you're doing a show that's about medicine, you have to know what, like, medical terms. If it's a law show, all of that, and you know, you've got to be really quick on your feet, really quick.
Yeah, see, that's no fun. Like, who became an actor to do homework?
It's so true, right? So true.
So that's really interesting, because I feel like if you get into those groups, they always say, oh, you should get into those groups, but it's hard to get into it's
Yeah.
kind of like the mafia, right?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
like, they don't want you in here.
Right, but, and once you get in, you cannot leave.
Well, you don't
It's like,
want
we have a
to,
session on
right?
Thursday. Oh, I can't.
I don't think you understand. We have a session on Thursday.
Okay, I'll be there.
But you don't really want to leave, right? Because, I mean, if you're like in a good one that's like working all the time, that's like
A lot of
sweet.
money.
Yeah,
It's a lot of money.
yeah. So, but you don't recommend going that route?
If you can get in
If you
one.
can.
Yeah, and
if
you have to have
get
the
it.
right temperament. You have to deal really well with pressure, and you know, you have to be able to stand in front of people and feel like you've got this. You know, and that's not everyone's personality. So you have to know what your strengths are.
I think that's really fascinating coming from Wonder Woman.
What the strengths are.
Yeah, I mean,
You know, if you can, you know, if you're bulletproof, if you can fly, if you're nigh invulnerable or actually invulnerable, you have to know these things.
Yes.
Has anyone seen the movie yet? The
Oh yeah, I've
Justice League
seen
movie?
it.
Everyone's. Oh, a lot of people have seen it. Okay.
I loved it. You can only say if you loved it.
Who loved it? Show of hands.
You can like it. You liked it.
Who
it was
liked
fun.
it?
It was fun. Yeah.
Was the sky blue?
Yes.
That's all I want to know.
Oh, so neither of you have seen. You
I've
saw
seen
it.
it.
You saw it. Have you seen it?
I have not seen it.
Okay. Well, is it because you're not in it, or no?
Yeah, I'm waiting for Green Lantern 2.
I thought it was good. It was a fun movie. It was more than I expected.
Right.
Okay, good.
You know?
You know,
did you get-
the cast is delightful together. They
Yeah.
are, they are just charming, and there's, you know, yeah, they were amazing together. And it was
Yeah.
fun to see them. Like, Aquaman, you know, I mean, it gave me chills to see him on screen.
See, that's so funny. You just reminded me of something. I saw a tweet earlier today from Alex Ross, the comic
Heard of
book
him.
artist,
Yes.
talking about
Artist.
his drawings of Aquaman. It's like, you know, he was first introduced from the Super Friends, and that was, you know, that iconic Aquaman. And it's funny, it's like, I loved Aquaman. It's like, but he changed it. Because I've got a theory that Aquaman has been on this rehab thing for the last, I don't know, 10-something years. And it's, to me, the biggest problem with Aquaman is the orange shirt.
Really?
Yes.
You don't like the orange shirt?
It makes no sense. What in the ocean is orange? A starfish? That's not terribly impressive.
Well, Nemo.
A clownfish!
I am the clown of the seven seas.
No. But
This is the guy, by the way, and I always joke about it, and he's heard this story a million times, but when we did the Justice League, Phil was, in between our takes, Phil would be on the floor reading his comic books. And I'm not kidding. And the
we
rest
recorded on Thursdays. Comic Book Day was Wednesday. What am I supposed to do?
and the rest of the cast were like, wait, so who's Aquaman? What's the origin story? You know, none of us knew what was going on. This guy, he's you, basically. If he weren't here, he'd be there. I mean, he's such a fan.
So do you still, where's your pull list? Do you need one? I know a place.
He does. He's the.
Well, it's funny because so much, you go digital, but I still try to go to a shop like
And get your
once a week.
physical
just
copies?
'cause-
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
And that's why when you asked me, I knew he would show up. I mean, because he supports this.
Yes.
This is what he cares about this universe.
Yeah.
So
I mean, this is fun. I mean, that's awesome. So you knew a lot about, were you a Green Lantern fan before you got Green Lantern? Or were you like, oh, I know it, he's not my favorite?
I'm a Batman guy.
You're a Batman guy?
I'll say it right out. I'm a Batman guy. Always have been.
Yeah.
Neil Adams, Batman, circa 1977. That is, to me, the quintessential Batman.
Oh,
Even though the stuff is blue, not black, I don't care. Like, that is Batman.
Yeah.
And so when I got Green Lantern, I was like, oh, I mean, obviously, I knew of Green Lantern, Earth 1, Earth 2, all that, but I'd never gone deep into it. Although I think I definitely had read the Hard Traveling Heroes, storyline, the stuff that they'd done in the 70s, which really just which is when they actually introduced the character of Jon Stewart. So I was familiar with everything, but just not, deep in it. And it was amazing and it was actually one of the first things I asked Bruce about. It was like, why this Green Lantern? Why is it Jon Stewart and not Hal?
Yeah. How driven.
And it's funny because, I mean, nowadays with representation and diversity all being buzzwords and everything, he said, and confirmed this is what I remember him saying, he's like, well, I didn't want to do a show where 7 white people save the universe every week. Like, it was just, he wanted the world he was creating to reflect the world he was in.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, and that's true, and that's one of the reasons why we cast Poplar over it, was that we wanted to increase the diversity in the group.
Nice.
I feel like you should be sitting up here.
I know.
because
Do you want to come
honestly,
sit up here?
Please.
Come on, Rich.
Yeah.
Justice League writer, Rich Fogel.
Writer producer.
Thank you. Because the funny thing is, there's going to be all these questions, and you're going to know the answers much more. It's like, well, I'm going to sit up here and make something up, and...
Well, you came in on Thursday. I was there the whole time.
Right, exactly.
But I say all the time, like, the actors usually get to do all these fun things, but it's these guys, and it's Rich, it's Dan, it's Dwayne. They created this show, and we got to come in and say their words every week, and they have as much to do with the iconic nature of the show now than we do. So it's right that he's up here.
Yeah, I mean, because you think about, we're talking about the movie, and people don't understand how difficult it is to write for 6 or 7 characters, I mean, I remember in the very beginning, it was just like, okay, 7 people have to talk, and there's got to be a fight, and it has to make sense in 24 minutes. Go, It was difficult, right?
Yeah.
So do you want to tell us about...
I
a little
had
bit
hair
about-
before we started.
We actually had the writers and the producers and the showrunner of the X-Men animated series here last month.
Okay.
So it's cool that now we have a writer-producer of this series, so we can kind of compare notes. So some of those writers were huge fans, like Phil, where they were really into the comic books and they knew everything about it. So they were kind of like the resource for the writers to make sure everything was like right, and they had like their passion stories they wanted to tell. Whereas the other 2 writers, who was the showrunner, Eric and Julia Lawal, they didn't read comics, knew nothing about the X-Men. They were more writing relationships and storylines so bring the 2 worlds together and you have this fantastic soap opera of superheroes that, I mean, they're just people. They're just like us. Except they can fly and, save the world and all that shit. But, Tell us about your side for the Justice League. Was it very similar to that? Did you have writers that were just writers? That's what they were there for, and you had the comic people? or were they both the same people?
On our staff, it was mostly the same. I mean, I have a big comic book background. Bruce obviously does.
Bruce. Oh, there's Tim. Can you just tell really quickly? Can you just tell people who don't a little bit about your background, just so they know where you?
Well, I've been writing animation for almost 40 years. I started out doing storyboards for Filmation. One of my first shows that I worked on was Mighty Mouse. And then I moved over into writing, and one of the first shows that I wrote on was Super Friends. And also Smurfs.
Oh, nice.
So I've had a long career, and I was at Disney and then at Hanna-Barbera when the Batman series came up, so I wasn't available to work on that in the first go-around. But when they started up the Superman series, I was available then, and I had worked with Alan Burnett a lot before that, who was the producer, writer-producer on Superman. So I got brought on first as freelance and then as a staff person on Superman.
Nice.
And I was sort of the Jack Kirby expert in that. So I wrote almost all of the Superman shows that had Darkseid and the Fourth World stuff in it. And so then when we were...
Starcrossed.
Yes. And then when we were getting ready to start up Justice League, because I had that sort of big story experience, I was sort of like a natural choice to run the thing from a story standpoint. So I would say the one sort of, I think, secret ingredient in the Justice League and in all of the Warner animated things was that Bruce and I and a couple of the other writers were really more Marvel people than they were.
Really?
I mean, we obviously were familiar with the characters, but our hearts were more like...
I never knew this. I'm devastated.
This is important.
It's
And
fascinating.
so it makes sense, actually, because what we did was we took those DC iconic characters and we tried to bring a little bit of the Marvel humanity to them, and sort of round them out a little bit. And so that really helped sort of give us a tone for the show, because my goal always with the first round of Justice League was I wanted it to feel like that sort of buzz that you got when you got a new comic book and you were like, oh, I want to see what happens next. I want to see what happens next. So I wanted it to be action-packed. I wanted it to be fun and have characters that you could care about.
See, I think that's really important, like having that little bit of emotional distance between you and the characters so that you can step back and see, okay, but what makes this a great story? Because if you don't have that, then basically you're writing fan fiction.
Yeah.
That's true.
And there's always something a little off about the fan fiction. Even like really, really well-written stuff, it's just like, you're not serving the story. You're just serving your 12-year-old self. I always wanted to see him do this. It's like, but why is he doing that?
Right,
You
yeah.
know?
So, I mean, a lot of times we had the luxury of looking back at 60 years worth of comic book lore. And so we went through all of it because we loved it. It was like, oh, we do this for work. Anyway, and we were able to cherry pick, which portions of the versions that we wanted to do, because Wonder Woman has so many different backgrounds and so many different sort of takes over the period of time. Same with Green Lantern and stuff like that. And so we were like, well, what's the core of the character? Let's go back to the core of the character, and then let's take the things that work and throw out the things that are not working for us. So,
I mean, that's kind of what they're doing in Rebirth right now, is after the New 52, that angered a lot of people. Now they're coming back with Rebirth, and I feel like, I mean, among customers and stuff, they're still liking it. They're liking what they're doing with the characters.
It doesn't feel marketing driven?
Because
that was my problem with New 52. Like, other than the fact that you're trying to launch 52 books at once, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby only could do 6 at once, and even then, one of them turned out to be Ant-Man. You know, if you're going to try to do 52, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
But, and also the fact, why has everybody got a narrow collar and armor? Everybody? Really? He's the fastest man on the planet. Why does he have armor? Clink, 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 clink. It's dumb.
It's not realistic.
I told you. Right?
That's so true. I always think about, because I'm more lenient on things. I like, when I'm watching movies, which is probably why I'm like, Justice League was great, is because I know that we're watching, like, these people don't exist. Like, so when people that harp on, like, things, like, I mean, that is a valid point. Like, why would he be doing that? But, like, we are also talking about a fantastical world. So I'm always, like, in my head, like, why are these people getting so mad? It's not like that guy can really fly and do all this stuff. Like, they know this is not real, right?
No, but it is real. It absolutely is.
But you know, it's like, if this is real, then this is real. And
Right.
why
No,
wouldn't that be real?
Okay,
What
but
makes
that's
that?
the thing, is that to do it well,
Yes.
you have to logic everything out.
Right.
And and we have these conversations, well, you know, Wonder Woman wouldn't do that. And it's like, well, she doesn't exist. She couldn't. But you
Right, internal logic, right?
exactly.
Yeah, so someone has to be the moral compass, like the you know, have it be there for Wonder Woman to make sure that she's authentic, be her best self, right? Like live her best life.
Well, and there's also the things like calibrating how strong Superman is or Wonder Woman is,
Right.
because it's like you don't want to get into a scene where, you know, they lift up a battleship in one scene, but then they get knocked over by a baseball in another scene. You know, it's like
True.
try and be consistent in terms of like where the power levels are.
Well, because that was one of the things, like, I remember in the beginning of our show, you guys depowered Superman, right?
Absolutely.
You know, this was not like I'm going to fly around the planet or push it. You know, he could actually feel pain.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he was super, but he wasn't that super.
Right.
And that was really driven from the story standpoint, which is if you have a god, you can't really do much with him.
And also, why are the other 6 people there?
Yeah, yeah, and the whole premise of the show is that they were going to be facing things that Superman could not handle by himself. So
So you guys didn't want to do the show where it was every week 6 people running to cover up the piece of kryptonite so Superman could actually, like, you know, solve whatever the problem was? I got it, go ahead.
well, the other trap that was very easy to fall into was that Batman was the smart one, and that he would always solve the things.
Oh.
And, you know, we had a lot of arguments about that, which was like, Batman can't always be the one to solve it. But that's his only power, is being smart.
And he has all the monies, right?
Yes, he does.
Wouldn't that be funny if, like, every episode was like, all right, let's head out. Oh, hold on. And he, like, gives everybody their, like, allowance. Just in case we get separated, you guys have to buy some snacks.
Yeah, they all get a
So that's
bath
Tony
bomb.
Stark.
Yeah,
Guys, here are the keys.
right?
I'd
He's
like to
their
get
dad.
back to the casting of Wonder Woman, though,
Yes.
because you sort of glossed over that a little bit, and that was an interesting story, which was we weren't sure what we wanted for that voice. We knew the character, we knew the you know, what she needed to be, but we didn't have the voice in our head, and we were playing around with the fact of, well, she's coming from this Greek island someplace. Does she have a Greek accent? Does she? You know, is she an immigrant? You know, she's an immigrant of some sort. So should she have that? But she needs to be royal and princessy also, and that's a real hard needle to thread right there. And so we really had a hard time with Wonder Woman. But what it came down to, and we listened to things over and over and over again, was that Susan's audition had a warmth and a humanity to it that you just liked her. You know,
Nice.
it's just you listen to the voice and the person behind it, and you liked her, and you know that's what we needed in Wonder Woman. So that's
Because Diana is very innocent. She's got like that purity to her.
yeah.
So that was what I was gonna ask Andrea that, but it's great that you're here to tell us, because I was like, what do you, when you're like sitting there casting everyone, do you already have a voice in your head and you're just waiting for someone to hit it and you're like, that's them, that's it, you know, or you're open like with Phil where he thought the other guy was gonna be it, and instead you say he's
Well,
the
Dennis
one that.
ended up getting to be a Green Lantern also.
Yeah.
He got to be Kilowog, so and he was great.
He was.
Yeah, so do you already have a voice in your head besides, like, I mean, that's great, because
I try to be open. I try and be open about it.
And do you close your eyes and do you not look at the person at all so that you have, like, even less of a, like, bias towards whoever it is?
I tend to look away. I tend to focus on the voice because that's where you have it. But you know, you can't help but sort of look through and see what's going on as well.
Right.
But a lot of times I'll be just like we've got the sides there that are the dialogue pieces that they're reading, and I'll be following along on that. So I'm not looking out over at the actor. I'm looking down at the sides and trying to picture the character in my mind.
Right.
And seeing if we can get that meshing. And Andrea is brilliant at this. I mean, she cast so many wonderful people.
Lots
It's
of
just
animated
great.
series. Everyone's childhood, I think.
Yeah.
She cast them.
Well, she directed the very first Smurf script that I.
Really?
So is that how did you know her, like, obviously before Just League, because you were both on Smurfs, but.
I did know her. But I do remember that, like, the story editors of Smurfs were there, and this was my first time in a recording, and I'm like, I was so excited. And they go, oh shoot, we're late for a meeting, and they left, the story editors, and I'm there. And she's reading along in the script, and she gets to this line and says, what does this mean? Well, it was something that the story editors had changed and I had never seen before. And I was like, I have no idea what that means. So I was useless.
Were you in on all the sessions?
For Smurfs, yes.
Yeah, for Justice League,
Oh, yeah.
did you get to sit, you sat there?
Oh, I was one of the scary people behind the glass.
Oh, were you?
Never. He was
Because
not
you know
scared.
they're out there in the booth and they're doing their thing and
Yeah.
they can see us going.
Did you change things on the spot? And like, if a read wasn't working, would you change anything?
Yeah.
Did you do that a lot on the show, or everything was just by the script?
Not that much. I mean, first of all, Andrea was great at getting performances out of people. And if there was a line that somebody didn't understand, we would discuss it. But Andrea would do a really good job of sort of translating the emotion
Yeah.
of what it was. You know, and maybe you can think of an example of this, but it's sort of like if you were hung up on a line and she's like, no, this means you love your mother.
You know, right, just give you a subtext. Well, her talent was being able to get the performance that the producers needed out of the actor, regardless of, I mean, because a lot of people don't factor in, with that Justice League cast, there were some people who were well versed in animation and some people who had never done it before, like Carl and George, you know, who were fantastic actors.
Right.
You know, there are a lot of animation voiceover directors who can only direct voiceover actors. But Andrea can do, you know, she can get a performance out of anybody. Because we had a lot of guest stars
Yeah.
on Justice League who were not familiar, you know, with animation, weren't used to performing into a microphone. And she was always able to translate it into a language they understood, make the environment comfortable. You know, because a lot of the actors we had come on-camera actors are used to memorizing all of their lines
Right.
before they can, you know, tie emotion to the stuff. And with this, you have to read it, say it, and put the emotion in it as it comes out of your mouth. You know, and not everybody, you know, is practiced at doing that.
Yeah, I remember that we cast Susan Sullivan as
My mother.
as your mother, and she was wonderful.
Oh my! And it was her birthday yesterday.
Yeah.
Hippolyta, Susan Sullivan's
Aw.
birthday yesterday.
Yeah. Anyway, she had not done it before,
No.
and she was very puzzled about the process. And I remember talking to her a lot about, like, well, what's going on here, and why are these characters doing this, and why is it so violent? And she was really put off by it, and I had to explain to her, you know, sort of like the metaphors of the conflict and all of that kind of stuff. And she was very game about it, and I think did a wonderful job. But she
perfect.
was just like really, you could see she was trying to figure it out.
I always tell the story about Alfred Molina because he sat next to me in one of the sessions, and he just looked over at me and, you know, said, I don't know what I'm doing. And, you know, I mean, it's Alfred Molina. You're fine. You're fine. You've got this. You've got this. You're don't worry. I mean, a lot of the actors, you all know the show. You know the guest stars we got. They were acclaimed actors.
Yeah, when he came in, I was just like, oh, great, it's amazing. And he's like, hi, call me Fred.
I know. Crazy.
So when they came in, you all got to be together.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
always group recordings.
Yeah.
I don't know about if that was you guys doing that or Andrea, but I find that the shows where the writing is the best, where they care the most about the writing, are the ones that tend to have group recordings.
Oh, okay.
You know, because it matters what the characters are saying and how they say it to each other. You know, if you're doing Clifford the Big Red Dog, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, well, what's Clifford feeling? And Emily Elizabeth says this, yeah. You know.
And there's the other thing too, and I don't know whether you guys have come across this, but with the development of digital recording technology, a lot of times these days in the booth what's happening is like, oh, we like the first part of that line, but the second part of this line, let's just cut it together. And I'm sitting there going, no, let them do it again. Let them get an organic performance out of this. Don't just slice it and dice it.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, because it does make a difference. You know, I mean, the way I respond to you depends on what you say to me, and it changes, even if it's the same words.
Oh,
You know?
thank you, Phil.
No, you're welcome.
No, it's for me as a writer in this medium, the recordings were always great because this was the one and the only chance that we had to see our words performed. And so it was like a radio show. You know, you get out there and you get to hear it come to life, and it's sort of like, with this group, it was always much better than what was going on in my head.
Now with the animation, are you guys just reacting off of each other, or are you watching it happen? So you don't have to match up to anything.
Damn you, Mrs. Doubtfire. Mrs. Doubtfire has ruined people's perception of animation for a
Right?
generation.
Oh,
The animation is not done until 9 months to a year after the
after the
recording is done.
voices? Okay.
Because
And even the storyboards are rarely done at that point. You're
Right.
working off the script.
yeah, because they can't animate until they
They
have
have-
the timing.
Okay.
Like, how long is the mouth going to be open? How many frames? I don't know unless I hear how Susan says great hair.
Okay. It's like the chicken before the egg, or that, like, is there animation before there's voices, or their voices? Like, what's interesting on X-Men is that, and that this is like 92. So they were saying that the voices would record and then they would get them, and it would not, they had to recast everyone in the beginning because they got the voices and they were like, what is this? So I mean, it's
They
a
didn't have
tribute
Andrea.
to Andrea that someone could come in and just like make this great Justice League cast, and it just works out. But they had trouble with that in the beginning.
Yeah, well, Andrea had been working in the DC universe for a long time because she'd done Batman and she'd done Superman and all of that, so she knew the tone and
Bruce.
Bruce. But the sort of, she was always going for the reality of it, and so it was not shouty, it was not high energy.
Cartoony.
Yeah, and all of that. You know, that a lot of times when you were sitting there, you would think, oh, that reading sounds really flat, but it was just the right amount. You know, it's like this is not a moment that needs to be italicized.
Right.
No, I once worked with a voice director who said, you have to end every line up. It gives it energy.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, your dog died. Not really.
Yeah.
Now both of you have worked on other things, video games and stuff like that.
You were doing Jackie Chan before Justice League, right?
Right.
So, what was your experiences
And
with
during Justice League.
Well, yeah,
After-
before.
Yeah, whenever
She was
Jack-
multitasking,
Maybe I
so she-
wasn't doing it before. Maybe I didn't.
No,
got
before.
that. Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I don't remember.
I remember.
I can't remember yesterday, so
Yeah,
it's
right.
fun. Yeah. So I mean, how did you where were you at when you met these people? Was this the best? Were they the best people you ever worked with?
Well, that's awkward.
They were super.
It was super.
Yeah, but did you on other stuff that you worked on? Were you doing ensemble records, or was this like a special thing?
No, Jackie was an ensemble.
Okay.
But it was a smaller group.
Yeah.
And that was a very special show with very special people. This was different because, I got to play this extraordinary character.
Yeah.
And so nothing compares to Wonder Woman.
Mm-hmm.
But it was and I've said this often, it was a very intimidating job. It was a very, it was working with people who were just at the top of their game, and I had done some animation, but not a ton of it, and I'd certainly never been a lead in a series. I'd done guest stars and things like that, but it took me about 2 years to lose my fear, and not even completely, and that's why it was so perfect for Diana in the beginning, because Diana was going to leaving Themyscira, going to a man's world, and it actually worked well with, with my experience, because I was
you
just,
had the same arc.
I did. Yeah, so it really worked, and if you listen to the first season, my voice is much smaller, and I found my voice literally as the series went on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Phil seemed surprised.
Yeah,
he had no idea.
Totally intimidated. I mean,
No.
honestly, and Andrea, she couldn't be lovelier and warmer, but it was intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
And Bruce, who, he's not a warm fuzzy guy. I mean, people would come on the show and they would be like, "Oh, I think he hates me." No, I've been working with him for 5 years. That's just Bruce.
Oh.
It's just Bruce. It's. I mean, you can speak to this better than I.
I'm not going to.
I would just, after every, I'd be the one clapping when we finished the episode, and I'd go up and just give him a kiss and a hug, because that's my personality.
Yeah.
But that's not his. And
Oh.
so it was just, it is what it is, but it was intimidating.
Yeah.
As all get out.
I remember telling you that you didn't know what you were getting into.
But look at me now.
I
Like,
know.
I mean, I'm just so grateful that I was asked to get into it.
Yeah.
Because it was, just the best gift of my professional life. I mean, hands down.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you're getting the recognition for it now, too, because at the time I didn't feel like you were.
Right. Definitely.
I think Susan's the best.
Stop. Okay. Let's move on. Other question.
But that's why I feel like I can relate so much to you, because I feel like you're so nice. When we had her here for Wonder Woman Day, if anyone was here, you got to see her these guys. Yeah, like you're so wonderful. And one of the things I was in researching, because I wanted to be have knowledge about everyone, is that Andrea said that she really cares about the actors, and she brought it out of the people, and you probably, I mean, I feel like if she was there, you kind of like a mom, but where she's makes everyone feel very comfortable.
She does.
And so it definitely, I feel like you were able to flourish under her direction.
And the scripts, and I mean,
yeah.
I had people giving me amazing things to say, and I also had, co-stars like this guy, and I had a little romance going with a certain guy on the show that was written into the scripts, and I will forever be grateful for that, for all the Wonder Bat fans out there. So it takes a village, and that's really true. I mean, it's a big group of people putting on a show, and the voice director really does give you context. She helps you. I mean, actors have to have an imagination. You have to be able to see it. You have to be able to make that real. So you're on a ship. You're in, you're wherever you are. It has to. You're on the mascara. You're talking to your mother. You have to make that come to life. And if you're good at it, you not only make it come to life for yourself, but you make it come to life for an audience as well. And so, that's.
The rehearsals were really interesting because Andrea would go through and she would highlight the things that she wanted to direct, and she would become like the narrator of the show. And so she would be reading selected parts of the descriptions in the script, so that the actors would know like where they were in relation to each other and where they were in the scene and all of that. And so it was really like bam, bam, bam. It was like.
And also, are you yelling? Are you talking to somebody across the way? Is Batman right here? Is Green Lantern right? Where are they? What is the context? What came before? What's happening? That's all a voice director.
Well, and what you're talking about is something nobody else does but her.
Yeah, she does a lot of homework.
Because she would have us read through the whole script with the entire cast before we recorded. We would do a speed read through of all the things. And part of it was, I think, for her to communicate to the actors, to give them a context. Because they're supposed to read the script.
Yeah.
Not everybody does. But when you go through that, the actors get a context for what they're doing. She gets sort of a roadmap of what people, where they're going. For the regulars, it's less of a question than for maybe some of the guest stars. It's like, oh, he's doing that way, so okay, I'm gonna have to get him to not do that. And it sort of lays out for everybody where we're going once we start. It's a roadmap. And then what will happen is, even though we take 20, 25 minutes at the beginning of her session, she would inevitably, Andrea Romano's session finishes 45 minutes early.
Yep.
Oh, really?
Because it's funny, even though you're taking an extra 25 minutes at the top, it still goes faster than any other 4-hour session because she knows what she's doing. And everybody else knows what they're doing.
I mean, she learned that method from Gordon Hunt at Hanna-Barbera. That's the way that he ran it. And
Oh, really?
But it's funny because there are a lot of other people who trained under Gordon who don't do it. And I think maybe they're just not confident that they can, if they take that time, they can make it up on the back end. I don't know. But they should.
I think that
well, and the rehearsal was always like loose and fun, and that's where a lot of the ad-libbing came in.
Right. That's where Michael Rosenbaum would go, just do his thing.
Hilarious. I feel like that would be like something that you would want to do. Like, in a lot of things in movies and television and everything, there's the table read. So it seems odd that it wouldn't be like a staple for like animation for everyone to go through.
Time is money.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're afraid, most movies, they don't rehearse. But the ones that do, that can, do. Because it gives everybody,
And we had the ADR sessions.
Yeah,
which I found out later.
Yeah,
which I found out
you
later.
get another shot at it.
Yes, and I was on doing a panel with Greg Weissman, and we talked about the ADR, and he said we didn't have any of that on Young Justice. We didn't have the money.
They didn't do ADR?
They did, but they didn't have it like separate sessions like we did, where they just didn't have the luxury of that kind of budget that I guess we had on Justice League.
Yeah, that culture at Warner Brothers really came from Gene McCurdy, who was the president of Warner's Animation at the time that Superman and Batman were being done and the beginning of Justice League. And she was always like, give the creators what they need to do the job, the work, to do the best that they could. And it was really, it's something that I never took for granted. But the ADR was really important because, in answer to your previous question about that, it gave us a chance to come back and correct some of the things that we may have done wrong in terms of proximity, how people are yelling, and when we see the visuals, and plus maybe even think up a better line of dialogue.
Although it was rare to have the lines be different. It was really rare for a line change. Sometimes, but more often than not, it was,
Dwayne was very good at that.
At like fixing.
Yeah, he would do little tweaks to lines. This was Dwayne McDuffie, who was a writer, and he later became producer on Justice League Unlimited. And he just was very good at that. that was never my strong point. It was like
You wrote it and let it
once I wrote it, I always did it the best version that I could. And
So for somebody to say, it's like, now make it better, it's like, I did already.
kind of, yeah. I mean, it was like I was ready to move on. Not that I didn't care. It was like that really was the best of my ability.
Oh, by the way, what we're talking about now,
The
when we say
ADR,
ADR, this is, a year after the record when the animation comes back and it's almost finished, but not totally, and there might be a mistake or they've rewritten something, for logic or for time. It's like, okay, we have to cut this scene, so we have to make a line that explains the thing that we cut, something like that. So that's when you're actually
By
voice
yourself.
voice actors are recording to the animation, like in Mrs. Doubtfire.
Maybe he was doing all ADR.
That's what he was, an ADR voice actor.
Right.
There it is.
Yeah, so it's additional dialogue recording. I used to work in a post-production studio, so we did all ADR. Where that's why I asked, because I don't remember us doing any animation, but everything was always ADR. It was always after the thing was already shot, and they had to come in and redo lines, and they had the beeps.
Yes.
You have to wait and you have to match it, and so I feel like that sometimes stifles actors, and you don't get as great of a performance as you did originally, because you're just like trying to do the timing, you're trying to match them up. There's like a lot of things.
It's a skill set, and I'll tell you, when you do it, and it's in the beginning, you don't quite get it, and then when you get it, you make that connection. You're looking up, and you're seeing Wonder Woman fall, and then she's going to hit the wall, and then she's going to throw a punch, and you've got to, okay, beep, 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 go, and you do it, and you can like follow her and create that sound for her. It's a great feeling when you do
So
it.
do you like it better? Do you sound like you like ADR? I know a lot of actors are like, oh, I don't want to go in and do it. I
Well,
already
it's
did
part
it.
of the process.
Yeah.
So
But I don't think anybody prefers it.
no, I
Right.
mean, I don't.
That's like Hamlet going, it's like, all right, now we're just going to pick up the to be. just give me 7 to be's. Like, what about the rest of it?
Right.
Well,
But there is a skill set to it, and when you can do it well, and it's a skill, so you have to practice. But when you can match it, it's a great feeling.
Yeah.
You know.
You
and
got a lot better at it over.
I did not start out strong. And then Dwayne McDuffie would always write in a lot of physicality for, where she's going, and I would just be looking through the glass at him. And he would be looking at me with this big smile, and, it was just, he put me through it, that's for sure.
I do remember that. I do remember you starting out not being as comfortable with the action stuff.
Oh, yeah,
Which
for
is,
sure.
because it's weird.
It's weird.
And it makes you very self-conscious.
That's the thing. You have to really not be self-conscious, and as an actor, the best actors don't care what they look like while they're in that booth, and they're just free. And it took me a while. All right, I'm still working on it, but it's challenging to let.
Because it's a weird thing. It's
It
like,
is.
all right, make the sound of you're throwing a punch through a wall. Like, what do I sound like when I punch through a wall?
And you don't know what's necessarily going to come out of your mouth, and that's the thing. And it's like beep,
And-
beep, beep.
And you go, that sounds like I'm pooping. Do I think that sounds like I'm pooping? Because that's not what I sound like when I'm pooping. Can we do it again?
That's it.
It's fun.
Ish. It's fun-ish. Yeah.
And were you ever like just sweating bullets because you just couldn't get it right, and you're like, why can't I get this right? Oh my God, everyone's staring at me. Because I feel like that sometimes there's just like that one thing where you're like, oh my God, they're gonna replace me because I can't seem to like say.
I mean, yes, always. I mean, it's true, and it's a room full of people, not for the ADR. A lot of times I was by myself for that, but a room full of people, and there were times where you would just stumble over speeches, or there'd be a word or two, and you just couldn't get it out. And I don't know any actor who doesn't feel self-conscious. I just don't. And yes, you can love to perform, and you can have confidence in your performing skills, but you don't want to look silly or stupid or not be funny so I mean, don't you think it's even with your chops?
No, definitely. There was one session I remember. I don't know if either one of you guys were there. It was during Unlimited, and there was a guest star doing a line, and it was a bunch of villains talking to each other. It was like, yes, I know. No Superman, no weapons. You know, one of those lines. And he couldn't get the yes. Like, they got the line, it's like, all right, let's go back. We didn't get the yes, let's write it. And then 3 takes turned into 5, turned into 10. And there's like, yes. And you saw Andrea go through every conceivable thing. She's like, let's talk about backstory. Let's just throw it away. Like, every possible direction. And it got to the point where I think we were well into double-digit takes. And like, for the rest of us in the room, it was like, first they're like, oh, this is funny. Oh, this is not funny. Oh, God. Oh, Jesus. Oh, Jesus. Come on! You know, and you just like cycle through, like, because after 5 takes, it stops being English.
Right, exactly.
Oh.
Like, that. What am I saying? I have no idea what I'm saying at this point.
Yeah.
And you can no longer, so like, then to dig through it and have to reconnect like any sort of emotion or logic to the sounds coming out of your mouth becomes harder and harder the more you have to do it. And yeah, and you start to sweat.
Yeah,
Because you know everybody's looking. Because
Yeah.
like 3 takes, 5, 4 takes, everybody does that. That's fine. But once you get past that, like, okay, now somebody's gonna miss picking up their kid because me.
Oh
But a lot of times, I mean, that happened more often than you would think it would. But Andrea was really good about it. She would just like let it pass, and then like at the end of the session when
Yes,
everybody was going
pickups.
goodbye, they'd
Come
say,
back.
"Oh, you know, we had a technical problem on this. Can we just do it one more time?"
Right.
You know, and then they'd get the actor in there alone, and she would really work with them. And if they had it in them, she would get it out of them.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of one of those things where you've been doing it so much, you're like, oh my God, we just need to move on because I'm never gonna, like, you know.
Yeah.
And then you get in there and it's first take, and you're like, oh, son of a bitch.
Yeah.
You know, like.
Well, in that particular case, she said, all right, we got it. We're done. And then afterwards, Bruce came into the booth.
Yeah,
Sat down and said, we rolling? Yes. Good, all right.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
no,
mean, it's
Bruce
just
would
human nature. See, they're
Yeah.
just people just like that.
And I remember one time, I felt sort of bad about this, was I wrote a scene where Hot Girl had to burp. And Maria could not burp. And so we had a parade of people coming into the microphone to try and burp. And we could not. Have you ever tried to burp on cue like that when people are looking at you?
Yeah.
It's impossible.
It's really hard. Unless that's like the
thing.
thing you
Like,
figured
that's
out how to do in
right.
5th grade to get a laugh.
Yeah.
Like, if that's not you. It's
Well,
like,
and it couldn't be too big and juicy a burp.
Oh.
right.
It had to be.
It
Yeah.
couldn't sound like, Bluto
Oh my
doing
gosh.
it. It had to sound like Hawk Girl.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, I want to open it up to the audience for questions. Does anyone have any questions for these lovely people?
we have an
Yes,
answer?
you right here in the front row.
Thank you guys all for being here. I've had the good fortune of meeting both of you at conventions in the past. I'm so happy that you're here. Rich, this is so interesting to get to hear from all of you. I wanted to ask you guys, when you're performing these characters sort of the first few seasons, the first few times you're playing them, I just had a workshop recently in acting that kind of got me thinking about things differently, where it's like, you don't want to think too results oriented. You don't want to think, how should the character sound? What should I be aiming for? You just kind of have to organically get there. But at the same time, you know you're playing like a character with a deep, booming, powerful voice. So you know you have to sort of aim for that. But you can't think, you know what I mean? Like you can't totally focus on that. I'm just curious if you could talk about the sort of pull and tug of that.
Well, I mean, for me, it's about reading the script, doing the research, finding out who the character is on like sort of a logical, emotional level, and then developing a voice that, fits that. Like, okay, so I've decided that this is what Jon Stewart sounds like. And I've figured out where that voice sits in my body. I know how to get there. But the thing is, you have to make sure it's a voice that you can then act with. Because if I could only do it down here, and then there's a tender scene. Oh, sweetie, I'm so sorry. You have to pick a voice, and I think a lot of times that's sort of the audition process. Is if they can't keep the voice consistent through all of the different things you need the character to do. It's like, he sounds great when he's angry. Do we have any scenes where he's not angry? Yeah. Okay, next. You know.
Oh.
But the thing is, you have to be able to do this voice in whatever context, whether it's him just having, you know, a beer with Flash, or when he's on trial for murder. You know, it has to be the same person.
Or the tender scenes with him and Maria. Which I have to say, Rich wrote the Star-Crossed episode, and we just did that at a reunion in Denver, at Denver Comic-Con, and they read
Aw.
those scenes, and I'll tell you, I mean, it would just, you know, I had to ask you for the script,
Yeah.
actually. And having them read those scenes, because it's really their script. I mean, it's their story. And you talk about actors, I mean, yes, it's a cartoon, but that stuff was as real as it gets. It was really something.
It's a good writing.
Yep.
Well, I think the point sort of boiled down that you're making is that the voice acting, it's acting.
It is.
You know, it's not the voice, it's the
Right.
voice acting.
Right, and for Wonder Woman, you know, I just had Andrea explain early on, and Bruce, when I auditioned, they showed me the picture of her, of the Diana we know, and the two things they always said was that she's a warrior and a princess. I've said that many, many times, but those were the two ingredients I always had to keep in my head. And when I got, you know, too much princess and not enough warrior, that's where Andrea would be like, you know, come on, she's an Amazon. That's not, you're not giving her that. And so, but I didn't have to do what Phil did. I didn't have to create an entirely different voice. I mean, Wonder Woman is me, it's my voice, perhaps a little bit lower in my register, and a little bit more regal.
So, talking about that real quick, because I know a lot of animation, you are required to come in with like this arsenal of like voices. So when you went in, was that just, you're like, I'm just gonna do me, or did you have like another voice that you tried and then you ended up just being you?
It was the voice you hear when I did Diana. I mean, that's who I heard her. I heard her in my head. You know, and that's, I mean, it was just utterly familiar playing that part for me and saying those lines. It wouldn't have been if she had been like a tough street, you know, but that kind of sophisticated warrior, that felt very natural for me.
So when you went to the audition, you were just, this is the voice of Wonder Woman, and then
This
they
is
were
my
like,
voice
this,
of Wonder
right?
Woman, and then it's up to them to
To say yes or no.
yes or no.
Did they, in the audition, were they ever like, can you do more like this? Can you do
Yeah,
more?
they did.
Yeah?
They gave me a little, and I remember Andrea telling me that the word strength, she wanted to hear a little bit of the G in there, strength, and just things like that. But you know, the articulation, the princess-like quality to her. You know, they coached me on that, and then it was like, okay, do your best, and I'm sure they did that for everybody. You know, and I got lucky.
And did you get to just, because she mentioned something about how she used to get to do like 5 minutes of like you do like some voices and then you read from the script. Did you do that, or was it like we're on a schedule and you're just doing the script and that's it? Because over the time she's done so many animated things that she said that you would get to do like some more stuff in the audition, which this one may not be that way because you guys are humans, superheroes.
We were just reading for that one role, but then of course, as many of you know, when you're doing animation, they ask you to do other parts. So you're the woman walking by on the street who sees Superman and says, "Hi, Superman," you know, whatever. Or I can scream well, and I cultivated that over the years. And so if they needed somebody looking out and seeing something frightening, I could scream. So, you know, many people could play multiple roles. You know, the guest stars.
Oh, you're your own little loop group.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. In the audition, Andrea was very good about chatting up the actors before they went into it, so that she would get them relaxed. And you know, it's like, hey, how are you doing? What are you up to these days? You know, just a little conversation beforehand, and then it would go into the thing.
Which is important.
I was
Get
so
them
not
relaxed.
relaxed. I was so not, you know, no.
Any other questions? Yes.
What was it like doing Static? Because that was such like an iconic piece of my childhood. I know moving away from Justice League. For
No,
a little
it's
bit,
great.
But what was that whole experience like?
That was great. That was my first solo. I'm trying to remember where that came in terms of Samurai Jack. It was my first or one of my first like solo leads on a show, and it was also a character that I could really relate to. I mean, it was for a superhero show, fairly down to earth, fairly realistic. It was about a teenage boy dealing with high school who happened to have electrical powers, and in a town where there was a bunch of supervillains. But there was something really sort of grounded about it. And the guys working on it, Alan Burnett and Dennis Cowan, and everybody they had in touch were really cool, and we had a great cast as well. Jason Marsden and Kevin Michael Richardson, Michelle Morgan, and it was a really nice family group. And I thought we had some really great scripts. Did you ever work on any of those?
No, I was busy.
Because you were off doing the other thing. And it was, fun. It was really fun. And it's weird because at one point, Static was still going, and then Justice League started. Mm-hmm. So we'd be coming to the same recording studio, like on Tuesday and Thursday, and it was just interesting, just that sort of gear shift.
Which for an actor is awesome.
It's a great gear shift.
That's great having 2 gigs.
I know, and then you start to feel like, well, now it's sort of my house. Because if you're coming there regularly, they put you on the same mic,
Forget Warner Brothers. It's Phil LaMarr house.
And that's why you were able to lie on the floor and read comic books.
Exactly.
You felt comfortable.
Probably so.
He did feel comfortable.
And the crossovers were really, really fun.
Right.
That was a great
There
challenge.
was Static and Green Lantern talking.
Green Lantern guest starred on a couple of episodes of Static, and an older Static was in a Justice League episode. Yeah, so yeah, but both shows were, as a comic book head, just heaven.
It's a dream. Yes?
Yeah, sorry, one more for Phil here. For the longest time, I was a fan of Hermes Conrad or like various voices in Family Guy. I'd be like, oh, there's the Phil LaMarr cameo right there. That was like me and my brother played that game. Where's the Phil LaMarr cameo? But so when Justice League came along, we were like, wow, doing that deep voice for sustained amounts of time. Did that end up being a strain on you? Because it's kind of unusual.
No, I mean it has to do with placement, because there are certain voices. Everybody's body's different. I remember years ago I did a production of Guys and Dolls, and I was playing the gangster from Chicago, Big Julie, and I'm not big.
When I did a voice like this, I was Big Julie from Chicago.
And for some reason,
This placement of this voice doesn't hurt at all. I could do this all night. I could sing from the back of the theater doing this voice.
now, if I were to move it here, all of a sudden if I do this for more than another 30 seconds, it's going to start to hurt. So there's just some weird thing.
But this voice, I don't know. It's in a place that's comfortable, like Susan's talking about. The Wonder Woman voice is not quite her voice, but it's close enough or in a solid enough place where you could just talk like this if you needed to. Like to get out of a, ticket or order something on the phone.
Hypothetically speaking.
Do you ever get people freaking out when they talk to you on the phone or something and they recognize your voice?
They don't usually. The biggest thing I've ever had on the phone is, I remember talking to a woman at the airline one time who just did not believe I was black. Well, you don't understand. No, I do, because I'm black. It's like, no, you're not. Like, yes, I am.
Yes, I am.
You're Latino black.
Exactly. It's like I'm not going to change my voice to prove.
Now, going on that, did you go to what? I feel like I asked you about this at Wonder Woman Day, but did you guys go to voiceover training? Is there anyone in LA that you still or voice? Do you have to go take care of your voice? Is it like singing?
Yes.
Where you constantly have to be working on it and taking care of it? Do you have a coach or?
Yeah, and this is just, interestingly enough, this came up recently because the video games and the contracts, and Phil was on the committee that was negotiating our contracts for the video games, and you know, it really came up like how our voices are used on those video games, and how intense those 4-hour sessions. Unlike animation, you're by yourself, and so it can be, not always, it can be very intense vocal work. You do have to protect your voice, you do have to take care of it. I mean, you'll find somebody on one end of the spectrum who will do vocal exercises before they go into a session, and then you'll have somebody who's smoking a cigarette out back before he goes, or, you know, smoking a cigarette when he's, you know, during the breaks. It's all the spectrum, it depends, you know, on the actor.
Okay.
Yeah, you just have to know your instrument.
Yes.
And it really is. I mean, I've gone to sessions where you come out and, you know, you're completely hoarse after, and you know, you have to scream for 2 hours, you know, whatever. And so you do have to protect it, and you do have to know where those voices, like Phil said, where is it coming from? You know, is it up here? You know, and you know, a singer knows all of that. So the most trained people come from that background, and like I said, and then the other side of it is, tell me when it's my turn.
And
you know?
sometimes you have to learn what your limits are, where things are. I remember, I don't know if I ever told you this, but where we used to record these shows at Warner Brothers had a studio at the Sherman Oaks Galleria. And at the Sherman Oaks Galleria back then, I don't know if it's still there, there was a Burke Williams spa. And I had an afternoon session once, and I thought, I got time before my session, I'll go get a massage. I'll be nice and relaxed before my session. This was the stupidest thing ever. Because basically, I walked into the session as if I had just been asleep. And it was like I had just woken up first thing in the morning. And you know, like when you woke up first thing in the morning,
Your voice is down here.
but more importantly, you have no range. And it was a session where I was doing Osmosis Jones, which is a Chris Rock sound-alike. Nothing but upper register. And it was, I learned something about myself and my instrument and training very much the hard way. Oh my God.
Yeah, I know that when Mark Hamill was coming in to do the Joker, a lot of times the big laughs, he would say, I need to leave that for the end of the session. I can't do it until the end of the section because it would just ruin him. And he knew that. But
And
you know,
oftentimes
he wouldn't
they will
hold back.
keep it.
Right.
They'll keep it for the end of the session.
Oh, okay.
You know, in video games, when you know you're going to have to die 16 ways, they'll keep that for the end of the session. Because inevitably, when you do a video game, you're going to die at some point. I mean, that's just video game world, you know. But there have to be more questions.
Yeah, there is.
Don't be shy,
Right back
anybody.
there.
So it's been about just over 10 years since Justice League Unlimited aired its last episode, and since then we've seen such an explosion of the popularity of comic books and comic book characters and movies and other television series. With that in mind, what do you think Justice League's place in that history is, and what do you think the legacy of the Justice League show is to you?
Phil?
See, that's a tough one because 10 years ago, I could have easily given you my top 3 superhero movies, top 3 superhero, series, of all time, in a second. Then they kept adding them, and some were really fantastic, some were so good, and all of a sudden, like, you're sticking one in between this one, okay, all right, my top 3 and 2/3, because they're actually making good ones now, as opposed to Spawn. Because think about it, like, there was Superman, 76, there was, Batman, 89, and then everything else sucked. It's like, okay, Spawn, the Fantastic Four thing that you can only get in bootleg copies. Now it's like, okay, well, is Spider-Man 2 better than the second Amazing Spider-Man? Or, it's, as far as Justice League, that's for historians to say.
I was going to say, that's up to you guys. It's like, we can't make that decision. We did the best job we could, and how it holds up is...
Yeah, and part of it is the fact that the Justice League series that we did, now you're looking at it from, a perspective of time, and you're like, I still like that.
Yeah.
You know, that says something.
And also, I think that there was a lapse there, like we talked about, where people didn't see these characters for a long time. And so many, when I meet people at Comic-Cons or at places like this, they always tell me that they got introduced to these characters through the Justice League. And so there's a generation out there who was too young for Linda Carter or, you know, Christopher Reeve, like, so they know George or they know Timmy Daly as Superman. And that's, you know, that's an extraordinary thing to be a part of, knowing that you were part of introducing people to these characters. So I think that because we're here 17 years after the show aired, or 16 years after the show aired, I mean, it was an extraordinary show. And I think that the fact that you all showed up, and I mean, you've worked on a lot of shows, Rich. I mean,
this was special.
It was special.
Yeah.
And the fans tell me that all the time, which is why I've often tried to get an animated film of our show done. It's very challenging. So as fans, you can make things happen. They've never reunited us, which is hard to believe, but it's true. And after 5 years of doing the show, we've worked together occasionally on other projects, but we've never been in a room together as the Justice League. So hopefully we'll see that with the movie and things like that. Maybe there'll be some, you know, projects down the road a little bit.
Well, you were a writer-producer on it. Is there any, can you do anything?
Andrea Romano and I just did an interview together, and she actually said, and we have it on tape, she actually said she would come out of retirement to direct that.
Oh, wow.
And she said to, you know, the fans need, it's like Young Justice coming back. The fans made that happen. You know, they binged it, and it, you know,
And the corporations realized, we left money on the table! Quick! Somebody get back there and grab it!
Yeah, the corporations really, I mean, they will only do it if they feel that there's an audience out there and money to be made. So
Justice League forever. Let's make it happen.
yes, yeah.
Get on your Twitters and your Facebooks.
Your Twitter cycles.
I think it's possible. I think especially with the Justice League being on the big screen now, everyone is excited about it, and everyone always talks about Justice League and Justice
Don't screw it up, Momoa!
And you guys are the Justice League.
Except it's different because they have a movie that they're promoting, and
right.
Believe me when I tell you, we could not be less on their radar right now. They have, you know, millions and millions of dollars they're concerned about recouping. So it's not like, I wonder what Susan and Phil are doing. You know, it's not a concern of theirs.
Kickstarter. We should do a Kickstarter.
He's already got one going for something else.
Oh yes, you have.
Yeah, give a little plug to that. Yes.
Oh
Yeah.
Yeah, Goblins. I'm writing and producing an animated show called Goblins, based on my friend's webcomic. And none of it is owned by massive corporation. But it's really challenging because animation is difficult and expensive, but we're trying to raise the money to make a 5-minute trailer showing our Goblins world, you know, because it's really unique. It's set in a D&D universe, but the Goblins are the adventuring party. You know, and it's really, really, it's funny. Times it's really like heartfelt, and sometimes really super violent, because it's warriors. And we've got an amazing cast. We've got Billy West, Maurice LaMarche, Jennifer Hale, Matthew Mercer, Steve Bloom, Jim Cummings, Tara Strong, and more some people that we've not announced yet. But that's still to come. And
but people ask all the time, you know, why didn't you do this one, or why weren't you in that? And it's like, we're actors, we're waiting for the phone to ring. So I love that he's doing this because he's making the content, he's creating the content, which actors don't usually do. And so the fact that this could be a precedent for things to come if you guys all support it
Well,
and
and
make
that's
it
the
happen.
thing, and we're crowdfunding it so that we can do it the way we want, you know, as opposed to taking it to the big company and they're going, goblins, right? So maybe we can put that up with, you know, My Little Pony. Like, no, it's not the same thing. So we're figuring we can make this, show it to them, let them know what it is, and also by crowdfunding it, you show them that there's an audience for it, and so you walk into the room with that, as opposed to just somebody, you know, knocking on the door asking for a handout for their idea. When they actually see something, a product that they can buy, they treat you with more respect.
Yeah, and that's something that's really different these days than it was 20 years ago, which was, it used to be that you would, if you had an idea for a show, you would put together a pitch, you would go in and pitch the show and stuff like that. They might buy it, they might not buy it, or something like that. I can't emphasize this strongly enough for any of you who have ideas for shows and things like that, which is make it in a format that you own. Make it a graphic novel, make it into a short thing like you're doing, where it becomes a product in and of itself that you own. And then it becomes something that they want to buy, as opposed to just one of the ideas that's out there floating around.
Right.
It becomes a real thing.
That's good advice. So if anyone wants to go see Phil's Goblins,
Yes,
it's on your website.
Yeah, there's a link on my Twitter, @Phil LaMarr. I've got the link to the Indiegogo page. You can go to goblinsanimated.com. That has the link there as well.
There's a question in the back.
Oh, yes.
Well, just because you were talking about, like, in a hypothetical reunion situation, at the end of Unlimited, the two, like, probably most compelling relationships in the show, which were Wonder Woman and Batman and Green Lantern and Hawk Girl, were kind of left open-ended. So if you guys had to complete that or to continue that story, where do you think it would end up at this point?
Well, I mean, at least from my perspective, we had a future episode.
Oh.
So, you know, although, as we know, that history is not necessarily written, but there's some kid out there with steel wings. What do you think, Rich?
Were you a fan of the Batman Wonder Woman relationship?
It was it was interesting how that came about, actually.
Please tell us.
And I can't remember which episode what it was, but there was one of the early episodes where Batman and Wonder Woman had a moment, you know, just a little thing. And it was just to show the concern or something like that. And these were the early days of the internet, and we started getting fan comments through the roof about, oh my God, is there something going on between Batman and Wonder Woman? And we're like, well, we hadn't thought of that, but that could be kind of cool. And so we began to sort of seed it in there based on the response that we got.
Oh, wow.
And I saw Dan Reba Dan was one of our directors, and we saw each other at a convention, and I had one of the pictures I have for signing was Wonder Woman kissing Batman, and he has that like goofy expression, like, and Dan explained to me how that whole thing came about, and how initially Bruce he did write the Wonder Woman Batman. He wanted that flirtation in there.
Yes.
But then there was a kiss.
Yeah.
And at the end, Bruce was like, I don't know that we need the kiss, because maybe that's too much. And Dan's like, Bruce, we need the kiss.
Yeah.
And having Dan come up to my table and seeing his sweet face and having him explain that to me was just the best.
Yeah.
It was just so great.
But what was nice about it was that in the history of it, it had always been Superman and Wonder Woman.
Right,
and,
right.
You know, it was like, yeah, we didn't want to go there. So
Too obvious. Too on the nose.
No, it's wrong.
But it's also, I think, really interesting, because to me, going into the Justice League, those three characters, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, were the big three, the icons. They're the ones that even people who don't know comic books or care about cartoons had an opinion about. You know, it's like, Batman wouldn't say that. Superman doesn't do that. That doesn't look like Wonder Woman. Like, even people who don't care have an opinion about those characters. So the fact that you guys took that chance, you know, was amazing. I mean, that's wild. You know?
And I always say that I don't ever see Batman, Diana and Bruce like picking out schools for their children. Because no one needs to see that. But I thought that
Well, he's so damaged.
he is. But I thought the flirtation was sweet. And in the Justice League movie, I'm not, telling tales out of school here. There's definitely a sweetness between the two characters, and there's definitely an energy between Batman and Wonder Woman. And I'd like to take credit for it right
I love it.
Yeah, I love the Wonder Bat fans. So yeah, when you see the movie, you'll see what I'm talking about.
Yes.
So the first series of Justice League was 2-part episodes.
Yep.
Was that a conscious decision with, I don't know how to phrase this, like, what was the decision behind it, and why was Comfort and Joy sort of the exception?
The simple answer goes back to what Phil was saying earlier, which was you've got 7 characters, and you've got to have a big threat. How do you fit that into a 22-minute episode and give everybody their moments?
Right.
So it was a lot of it was just a question of how to tell a story that was epic enough for Justice League, and we decided to experiment with this idea. It was like doing a movie every week. But then there were some stories that didn't quite rise to needing that much time to it. And Comfort and Joy was a story that we really wanted to tell. We liked the story, but it didn't feel like it could be a 2-parter. It felt like it would have been padded out. And so we thought, rather than just being dogmatic and sticking to our format, which the network didn't like, by the way. They didn't like
The 2-parter?
The 2-parters.
I would imagine.
They thought that people didn't have the attention span for it. And so, we were flexible enough that, there were a couple of them where we said, okay, this can be a half-hour episode. Or we had others that were 3-part episodes. So,
And so we've heard the stories about Bruce, for Bruce to stick with the project. He wasn't crazy about, staying with the 7 characters.
Oh, you're talking about the switch from
Yeah.
Justice
To
League to
Unlimited. And so you talk about having to create 7, give these 7 characters their due. What happens when it expands to Justice League
Were
Unlimited?
you on Unlimited?
I wasn't on it, but I was aware of what was going on, and I talked to Dwayne a lot about it. And basically, it comes down to character. That they were always telling stories about 1 or 2 characters within this world of Justice League. And that's kind of an extension of what we were doing in the first iteration of it, which was we always considered it sort of like a wheel show, where instead of having 1 star, we had 7 stars. And so this episode would feature Jon Stewart. This episode would feature Diana. This one would feature Superman, and those would be the leads for those shows, and the others would fall back and become the supporting characters. So you were always telling a story about a character. And so with Unlimited, whether it was one of the big 7 or whether it was one of the other ones, that was the focus.
You just had more people fall back.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Well, it is. It's almost 4-ish. So we want everyone to be able to come up here and meet you guys, if that's cool.
Yeah, I know Phil has to leave shortly.
Oh,
He
yeah.
has
Okay.
another engagement, but yeah.
Okay.
But yeah,
You have
I've got some
time? Okay. So, I want to thank you, wonderful people, for being here.